Keap is a little bit like a tree. Ready? Okay. You plant it in the ground, things grow out of it, and you get all these benefits.
You know, Keap might be a superhero that comes in and helps you when you're just at that point of frustration.
Small businesses are the heroes. Keap's the sidekick, comes along and helps you in your crusades.
Keap would be an octopus because it's got all those arms and it can keep track of so many different things for you if you trained the octopus.
Keap is a fantastic product that helps small businesses grow.
Keap is CRM, sales and marketing automation for small businesses.
CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management.
The CRM helps you to manage that relationship.
We've given them one place for their sales, their marketing, their payments.
One arm could be, calling your customers. One arm could be texting them.
The typical day without Keap is
Chaos.
It is certainly chaos.
It's the 4 Excel spreadsheets I have open on my laptop. It's the 15 sticky notes I have stuck to my desk.
Did I call this person back? Did I reach back out? Did I send an email?
Which Post-it note comes first? Which notebook comes first?
It all starts with getting organized and calming down that chaos.
Another arm could be sending emails to them. One arm could be writing down information about your clients.
Keap controls the chaos that every small business owner faces every day.
The coolest thing about Keap as a product right now is the Keap business line.
The appointments feature.
automation.
Automation.
The coolest thing about Keap as a product is having one system to grow your business.
Another arm could be putting an appointment on a calendar, and another arm could be sending a quote to a client. I don't know. How many? That's a lot. Maybe it's a squid. Maybe Keap's a squid. I don't know.
All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody for helping us to get it set up. This is fun.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Hey everybody, Clate Mask here, co-founder and CEO of Keap. I'm really excited to be with you here today, and I've got an awesome guest I'm going to spend some time with here, Carlos Hidalgo from Vism CX. Carlos, thanks for being with us.
Clay, thanks for having me. I'm really pleased to be here, and I've been a fan of you guys for a very long time.
That's right. We were talking, this goes back 10 years, right? That's so fun.
At least.
Yeah, well, thanks for being with us. So the topic today is, how do you maintain customer relationships while growing your business? And, we hear people say all the time, business is relationships. It's all about relationships. And yet you and I both know, as you try to grow a business, you start to drop the ball with some of those really important relationships. You start to mess up on certain things. You get egg on your face, and you get so frustrated as a business owner because you're trying to serve your clients effectively. And despite your best efforts, your team's best efforts, things start to slip as you grow your business. And the business gets stuck and can't grow because the maxim is true that business is relationships. But how do you scale those? How do you grow? How do you do that? And particularly as an entrepreneur, how do you do that as, when you're in a small business, you're starting up, how do you take that great service that you offer and spread it to more clients, because there's only so much of you to go around. So we're going to talk about some of those pains, some of those challenges. And I know you've had a lot of experience with this. Why don't you give us just a little bit of background on what you've done, maybe spend a couple minutes on, first, tell us what Vism CX is so our audience understands why you're so passionate about this. And then maybe just a little background on how you got to this point.
Yeah, well, first, Vism CX is an advisory firm focused. Obviously, we have CX in our name. So, but we really focus on a lot of different areas because our whole philosophy around customer experience means it starts inside your company with your employees and with your executives.
Love it.
So we advise companies on how to enable, equip, and empower customer experience. My entrepreneurial journey started almost 15 years ago. Hard to believe that, but always had wanted to start my company. So I left a promising career in the software world, started in 2005, co-founded an agency, which is now known as Annuitas. They're still off and running. We started with just 2 of us, grew that. By the time I left as CEO, we had 35 employees. So I can definitely relate to what you had talked to of how do you scale that.
Yeah.
So left Annuitas at late 2016, early 2017, and then started Vism CX, a little bit different model. We're not adding employees. We're not growing. We have a few contractors that we use here and there. But yeah, it's been a heck of a ride. I wrote a book about my journey, which launched in June. So it's been a lot of fun.
Okay, awesome. So Vism CX, everybody, you said CX, customer experience. It's kind of a buzzword, buzz phrase in the industry, I guess, or in the business world, really. You hear it whatever industry you're in. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Obviously, you have a bunch of passion around that, but I think it's also important for our listeners to understand you've been there, done that. You've grown a business.
Yeah.
You know what the challenges are like as you're trying to build those relationships with your customers. I think that all entrepreneurs have been through that frustrating experience where you realize you've dropped the ball with a client, or maybe a team member has dropped the ball, and you've got to come in and sort of save the day as the business owner. And that might feel good the first time or the second time. And then you realize, no, this is really lousy. I've got to keep doing this. This isn't good for the customer. There are only so many hours in the day for me to do this. And sometimes you realize, and I can't fix it. I'm not able to fix it. The team's got to be able to serve the client more effectively. So you've got a lot of experience around this with the agency that you built up, now with Vism CX. What are some of the things that you've seen that business owners maybe slip up on, some mistakes that they make as they're trying to grow their business and maybe not nurturing those relationships, not building that customer experience in an effective way?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that I've seen is business owners take those relationships for granted, where your current customer base, and it may be you've had them for a long time, and you just kind of start to slip. You stop interacting with them in the way that you used to.
Yeah.
And so what happens from a customer perspective, and this is how we have to think, all from the customer perspective, of you used to be very attentive, very hands-on, telling me how much you love me. But as you've scaled, I'm getting less of your time and attention.
Yes.
And so we have to be really cognizant
Carlos,
of
you're
that.
speaking truth to me, man. I feel it.
Right.
I've lived
Yeah.
recently what you're describing, so I'll talk a little bit about that. But yeah, that's what happens, right? You're trying to grow, and then you start to slip in your attention to longtime customers, longtime clients, people that have helped you to build the business to where you are.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I see is as we scale is what kind of employee are we bringing in, even if it's a contractor, bringing into our business. One of the things that customers, whether or not they realize it or can articulate that, they align with our culture.
Yeah.
And I believe as businesses, as entrepreneurs, we have to define what our culture is, what our values are, and make sure our customers align to that. It's one of the things we still do at Vism. We won't work with customers that don't align to our values. Doesn't mean they're wrong and we're right. It just means it's not going to be a good marriage.
Yeah.
So you can bring in the most talented individual, but if they're not aligned to your culture and then they start to interact with your customer, now you have a train wreck.
Yeah.
Because that customer has been accustomed to that culture and the way of doing things, and now you've got this individual, and that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I want to dig into that one a little bit more. You brought up two things here. The first is taking customers for granted and not giving them the attention that either you once did or that they need. And then the second is really getting aligned internally on how you're going to serve those customers, bringing in the right customers, bringing in the right employees to serve those customers. So let's get to that one in a second. But I got to tell you that as you were talking about the first one, it was painful for me. Because
I saw you twitch a little bit.
Yes, that's right. Because I think some of the audience may know this, but as we, a couple of years ago when we were saying, okay, we need to expand the market so we can serve millions of small businesses, we needed to create a simplified version of our software. Well, as we did that, it required so much focus and attention that there was some neglect there with existing client relationships, people that we love, that we valued those relationships with, and there was some slip there, and I definitely began to see it, and it wasn't until earlier this year that we started to address that and improve it, and we've been working to rebuild that and getting stronger and stronger. And when you're in a subscription business, you'll see it in churn, you'll see it in customer complaints, that sort of thing. But from the entrepreneur's standpoint, the mission's the same, the vision's the same. You're trying to serve those customers. As you take on more, it can be really challenging and problematic. So, that's a recent experience for me. I remember in our earlier stages, we had a similar thing as we were first getting our product out, and we had custom software clients and product clients, and learning how to serve both of those clients as we were going through that that was a real challenge for us. So
Sure.
I know that the entrepreneur faces these kinds of challenges every day, where you do love that customer, you appreciate that client, you're grateful that you're able to serve them and help them. And sometimes there's only so much of your focus and resources to go around to serve. And so you're trying to grow, and yet sometimes you get ahead of yourself a little bit and you make mistakes in that process.
Well, I think you do, but I also think it's really important as you start to grow, it's setting that customer expectation.
Yeah, great.
It's, hey,
point.
we're not going to be the same company we used to be. You're not, I'm not saying never call me. I'm not saying don't text me or engage with me. But my attention, because we're growing, my attention, here's somebody new that you can turn to get that immediate response. So we still want to be responsive, but the responsiveness may not come from me as the individual.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important, rather than just get so far out over our skis where it takes that customer calling us going, what's happened?
Right.
We're being proactive in setting the expectation with our customers to say, here's some things that are going to change. Our quality is not going to change. You may not just see me as much as you used to or hear from me as much, but rest assured, I'm keeping tabs on the quality that you expect from us as an organization.
Okay, so let's dig into that one a little bit before we go to this other big issue that you raised, which is around hiring the right clients, hiring the right people so that you can serve them and deliver your benefits to that client. But let's talk about expectations for a second, because I think this is an area that gets the best of entrepreneurs at times.
Oh,
yeah. You're in this agency. You probably remember, you go back to when you started that agency, and everybody's used to your time and your expertise. And then all of a sudden, there's not enough of you, so you need to hand over the relationship, or at least the point of that relationship, to another person on your team. How do you do that in a way that doesn't cause the client to feel like they've become a second-class citizen? Because that's what naturally it feels like to them. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I got to that phase quicker than I expected. But part of what I did, and we were a services firm, is I build that relationship with the client. And some of them were longer-term relationships. Mm-hmm. But then I brought in an executive that we worked with. And what I said is, it's going to be kind of this seamless transition where you're going to ride shotgun, I'm going to lead, and then we're going to subtly transition. And it wasn't like we didn't tell the client. Mm-hmm. We made the introductions, I attended kickoffs, and then I would say, hey, and once they built that trust level with the other executive, yes, that was my cue to say, I only need to be here for certain things. You now let me know if there's an issue, what I need. And then periodically I would still check in. Hey, how are we doing? Are you guys still happy? Hey, I'm going to be in town. Can we grab dinner? Yeah. So it was that type of transition. It wasn't just an immediate, oh, here's the new person, I'll see you later. Yeah. We carefully planned it out so that the client became accustomed to the new individual. And again, that new individual shared the same cultural values that we had founded the company on.
Okay, great. So there were a bunch of nuggets in what you just said there. You said it and acted like it was just so natural that everybody does this. And by the way, as we talk about it, you listen to it and it's like, well, yeah, that's what we should do. And my experience has been, both in our business and watching tens of thousands of small businesses that we work with, while this makes total sense, the whirlwind and the day-to-day chaos that is business causes these things to slip. And so I want us to just...
tyranny of the urgent.
Yes, the tyranny of the urgent. There you go. So you just laid out, basically what you said is you transitioned the relationship of trust to the next person. And you said, some of the specific things you said were, I get on the calls and we're both there initially, and I explain it to the client so the client understands what's happening, and I'm here for you, and you help the person that's taking the lead on the relationship that works for you. You help that person really take over the relationship and start to lead, and then you start to fade out and say, I only check in on these certain things, or I only handle these certain things. And then you get to a point where it's like, I just do a health check every once in a while. I check in to see how things are going, or I'm going to be in town, so I have dinner with you. What you've described is a process of transferring the trust in the relationship to a different person in your company. And there's a client side of that, which you talked about, but there's also the employee side of that. So you talked a lot about the client side. How do you do the employee part of it and have you learned any things in the process where it makes it possible for your employee to be successful? Because that employee is sitting there saying, okay, I got to take over for Carlos. I got to do this. I got to do a good job. I'm on the spot here. And there's a lot of truth to that. How do you set up that employee for success?
Yeah, well, truth be told, I've learned a lot because I used to be a terrible hirer. I would get so excited about somebody, they'd come in and it was like, ooh, did not go well. And it was finally my wife who said, you keep hiring for talent and skill. You need to hire for personality and culture. And it was like this eureka moment. I don't know that I applied it immediately, but she was so right. And I think you start with saying, is the individual I'm bringing on aligned just at a basis? I can teach a skill. I can't teach you culture.
Yeah.
Either you're going to be aligned with what we've set up here as a business or you're not. And so that to me now is the first, and that's what I advise my small and mid-sized business, even my enterprise clients on, is hire for cultural fit. You can teach a skill. So, and then I think it's making sure you're hiring the individual that can carry that relationship. Okay. So this isn't all due respect, a 1 to 2 year at a school type of individual. This is a seasoned professional who I always ask the question, can they sit in a boardroom? Can they sit with a CFO or a CEO of your customer and gently push back in a respectful way, but also in an informative way? Yeah. Can they carry that type of gravitas in a meeting where they're going to be respected? Because that's part of that trust factor. And so if you can find out those two things and then just be really clear with this employee or whoever you're bringing on, a co-executive, to say, this is part of what I'm bringing you on for, is to kind of replicate myself, because I can't do it if I just stay as a sole proprietor.
Okay, that is awesome, Carlos. So you've just described how to set up the employee for success. And what I heard you say is it starts with getting the right employee in the seat.
100%.
And we'll come back around to that, because that was really the second point, is how do we hire the right employees and the right clients so that we can be successful. So we'll come back around to that. But what you described was getting the right employee in the seat, and then really helping them to understand the expectations so that they can take over for you and build the trust with that client. And then you have a client side of that experience as well, where you're helping the client to understand. So that's the stuff that can slip through the cracks really easily when we get going 90 miles an hour, where the tyranny of the urgent takes over the day. But if we're attentive to it, and if, for our audience that's listening to this, if you've got a service businesses with high valued clientele, what Carlos just described is really important for how you scale your business. And I hear this, Carlos, over and over and over. As you know, I talk a lot about the stages of small business growth and how people move from solopreneur to new employer and so forth through the stages of growth. And a lot of times the challenge is that they don't grow the people function of the business effectively. You've just given a piece of how to do that, and they end up having a business where they wish they could do more, but they can't replicate themselves. And so you've shared some really good information about that. One last thing I want to touch on here before we go to hiring and to delivering your brand promise to the right clients. What about the listeners out there who have a business that's less like an agency or a very professional services type organization, where it's high valued clientele? That's important. We just talked about that. But there's also the scenario where I've got customers. I've got clients that are lower touch. They don't have to have my personal connection all the time. Right. But you've established your vision for the company. You've established kind of what you stand for, even if you haven't done it intentionally. Those customers are kind of buying into you as the entrepreneur and what you offer, even if they never talk to you, right? So how does the entrepreneur grow those customer relationships when they're not the one talking to the client every day, but they're still a valued customer, a valued client in the entrepreneur's business?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm actually going to use an example of my car mechanic.
Okay.
So Josh actually was just on the phone with his guys this morning. Josh started at a different garage. I went in, I was new to Colorado Springs, did the search. They were closest to the house. The minute I walked in, he was looking me in the eye, asking me what I needed, informative, educational. So I formed a relationship with Josh. Well, lo and behold, he ended up deciding he wanted his own shop. So he started his own shop. I tracked him down. Now he's got 4 other guys working for him. There are many times I go in, I don't see Josh. I don't talk to him. As a matter of fact, today when I talked to Rob. But what he's done is he has ensured that his guys know, hey, this guy brings me 5 cars. This is how much we do for them. This is typically what we do for them. And I get that same level of service. And then he's upped his game where he's put in little things like, I make an appointment, I get a text reminding me of that. And then I can put it right in my calendar. I also get an email. You go in to the shop, and while you're waiting for your car, there's a video of you getting to watch the mechanics work on your car.
Cool.
So it's those little things that he's done to elevate that experience. And I would say probably 60% of the time when I go in, he's not there because he's pursuing other business that he needs to go track down. But his shop, his guys, and the experience of when I call, they all know who I am. And so even though I'm one of what I would say probably several hundred customers, I'm still being treated like I'm important and valued. And I know I'm not the highest value he's got.
That's, Carlos, that's awesome. And that's, you hit right on it. You know, for entrepreneurs that have hundreds of customers or even thousands of customers, you pointed out at least 2 things, maybe 3 things there. One, in what you were saying, there was embedded this idea that he has established what his shop stands for. His guys know it, as you put it. You know, he's got his guys, and they know what they're supposed to do. He's established what he stands for, what kind of service he delivers, how he does it. The second thing that you said is he creates that touch and that connection with the customer through emails and communications and text messages, ways to follow up. Now you're speaking my language, right? He's done things so that he can stay close to that customer, even though he's not the person. He's got automation in place, I'm sure, to do some of that. And then the third thing you said, it sounded like he does a lot of things to reinforce how he does things. So your example of the video to see, he's really saying, look, we're transparent. The way we do things, the way we operate, we're authentic. You get an opportunity to see us. Why? I'm sure because for many people, they're distrustful of mechanics. And so he wants to show, hey, look, this is how we do it. And you can see all the time the cars we're working on, that sort of thing. So he's building relationship by establishing what his brand stands for, having people who fit that, maintaining connection through communication and technology, and then reinforcing his brand in a number of different ways. I imagine if we went deeper, you could talk about how he bills and how he walks you through what the car needs to, what needs to be done on the car, that sort of thing. But whatever the, not to use a bad pun, but whatever the mechanics are of delivering that customer experience, the point is he's got a way of doing it. And I think a lot of times when business owners get started, their way is kind of in their head. It's just sort of there. So this kind of gets us back to the question, or back to the issue, that kind of a big one you raised right at the beginning of how do you hire the right clients and the right customers, or the right clients and the right employees to deliver this experience, especially when you may not have clearly out of your head what this experience is we're trying to deliver. I mean, I got to believe a big part of what you do is helping people see, well, what kind of experience do you want to deliver? Right.
And I think that the experience is tied to your brand mission and value.
Love it.
So what do you just talked about the mechanic, right? He knows what kind of business he wants to be. So what kind of business do you want to be? So at Viz and CX, we thought long and hard about this, and we came down to one word, and it's a big word, and we talked about we want to be in the business of transformation. Now that's a huge word, but really it came from our own passion of wanting to help people.
Yeah.
And so we say we want to transform the lives of our clients, both personally and corporately. And again, transform doesn't mean we're going to rescue them from some of their deepest, darkest struggles, but we want to make an impact.
Yeah.
We want to transform the lives of those that we work with, whether you're a business partner that we have a financial agreement in place or another vendor we bring in. We want to transform all the people who work for us in a contract perspective. And then we also carry that outwardly in that we give to some nonprofits. And so we believe that in doing so, we're helping transform the lives that they're touching.
Cool.
So I think understanding that promise And so that helps us align to, are we hiring the right customers?
Yeah.
Are we bringing in the right customers? Because what I always say is, I get the question, well, how big do we have to be for you to work with us? I'm like, well, first and foremost, do you want to drive effectual change? So there's that transformation. If it's, well, we only need this little project, if you can't really answer yes to that question, we're not going to be the right vendor for you.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be the right customer for us.
Yep.
And so I think if we were to scale, one of the hallmarks at Annuitas was we wanted to teach our clients to do what we do.
Yeah.
We want to make them professionals at demand generation and B2B marketing. If we had clients who weren't, it simply were just like, no, you guys do it all. We would have to really weigh, is that the right client for us? We also valued respect and collaboration. We fired some clients because they didn't meet that value. And the way they treated our people just wasn't the right way.
Yeah.
And it wasn't done flippantly, but that's how we started to look at that alignment from a customer perspective. And then you can tell a lot when you interview somebody if they're going to align to your values.
Yes.
Just some simple questions about, tell me what gets you out of bed in the morning. What is it about our company that attracts you?
Yeah.
If your whole value is driving revenue and they're going, well, money motivates me, okay, you may have a match.
Yeah.
If you are a purpose-driven company and they're talking about, well, money is my motivator, I would have some pause of bringing that person on. And again, it doesn't mean they're wrong and you're right. It's just you've got to make sure that relationship with your employee is going to be solid and continue to gel.
Yep, great stuff. When you, as you were talking, I remembered, the point you're making about establishing your identity. It's like, what do you stand for? There are lots of different ways people talk about this: purpose, values, mission. There's all kinds of books and podcasts and thought leadership out there around this. But I remembered in the early stages of our business, we had a handful of employees, and I remember feeling like we weren't all on the same page, and it was frustrating. And I would see examples of serving the customer in a way that was, frankly, like caused my skin to crawl. I was like, and I remember in a fit of sort of, it was sort of like my Jerry Maguire moment, but it was not a big long thing that I wrote. I wrote a one-page thing, and it was who we are, what we do, and why we exist. And it just came out of me because I was like, I was so passionate about serving our customers and getting it right for them. Yeah. And I wanted people to understand what unites us internally, what it is that we do. And it was just a simple Word doc. I mean, it was a one-page thing, and I slapped it next to everybody's desk, and I just said, "This is who we are. This is what we do. This is why we exist." And that served us well for quite some time. And then I had to get a little more formal about it, and I had to do the Jim Collins work of establishing your purpose and your values and your mission. And over time, what we found is exactly what you described. To grow the business, we needed to hire and coach and fire to our purpose, values, and mission.
Yeah.
And over the years, when we've done that well, the business does well. When we don't do that so well, the business doesn't do as well. That's just how it is. So I appreciate what you're sharing there. I hope that our audience, whether they are a solopreneur who's getting ready to hire that first person, because by the way, when it's by yourself, it can all live inside of your head, and that's fine. As soon as
you don't need to write anything down.
That's right. As soon as you've got somebody, you don't realize it, but you're expecting them to read your mind. And if you don't get it out on paper, they don't know. They can sort of soak it up by osmosis or something to try to understand it. But it's a lot better once you have 2, 3, 4 employees to say, look, folks, here's what we do, and involve them in that conversation so they get it and they understand it. When I did it the first time, I literally was in a fit of frustration. I slapped it up next to everybody's desk, and I was like, please do this. This is us. But I've learned later that it's better to co-create that together so that you have a stand for what you are, but you allow your employees to ask questions and buy into it so they realize, that's who we are. That's what we want to do.
And there are two huge things. That is huge, is your employees have to be part of that culture creation. And culture is not putting a ping pong table in the break room.
Right.
So having
nor is it slapping up who we are, what we do, why we exist. I learned that later. It took me a while, but you can't just say, hey, here's what it is, and expect people to believe it. You can't just throw a ping pong table up or have certain perks. That's not culture.
Right, because I think as you scale, and we talked about this earlier before we went on air, is when you start to hire or see people in your hallways that you're like, oh, I didn't know we hired them. Right? They're being hired by people that you didn't even necessarily hire. So I think that's number one. But you said something which I thought was so important: the coaching. Culture is not set it and forget it.
Yes.
So one of the things that we did at Annuitas is right after a meeting with a client, the lead executive would then say, okay, let's have a review of that. Here's what went well. Here's what we can improve on. And it was like an in the moment coaching experience for the other individuals, whether they were director level or entry level, so they would learn. And sometimes it was like, hey, you cut that client off. They were in the middle of a sentence and you cut them off. So you need to actively listen to what the client and not be so ready to speak or wait for that pause or that period so you can jump in. So it was that active coaching. And I think that's a huge thing. Culture is not set it and forget it.
Yeah, well said. So, as we we help people focus on building those relationships, delivering on expectations, creating that great client experience as they grow their business. We've talked about how important it is to not take those relationships for granted, how you can transition relationships effectively, if you're in a high touch clientele type relationship. We also talked about how you can scale your experience for customers when you have hundreds or thousands of customers and it's not necessarily a high touch relationship, by establishing your brand identity, hiring the right people who can deliver that experience, making it possible for you to do what you do best and enable your employees to do what they do best so that your customers have a consistent experience. Those are all really helpful. I wanted to take a second and dive into customer experience, because I think we hear customer experience and maybe, it's kind of a newer phrase that's really caught fire in the last few years. What's the difference between customer service and customer experience?
Yeah, great question. I can have a lousy experience, but really good customer service. The example that I shared with you, I think, recently was my wife and I were at a restaurant that we frequent. Really good food, typically good service. We usually didn't have an issue. This one night, it was just a bad night. We waited forever I say forever, it was probably close to an hour for our food.
Yeah, that's forever.
Our order was wrong. There was so many things that went wrong. It was just a lousy experience.
Yeah.
In that restaurant, which we've become accustomed to, actually really good experience. That night, bad experience. Well, the server came over and apologized. The manager came over and said, we're going to comp your bill. So they in light of a bad experience, they provided really good service to make up for the bad experience. But when we think about experience, what we have to understand is we're selling to human beings. Whether it's consumer or B2B, we have a person on the other end. That person may have woke up with and had an argument with their spouse on their way out the door. They may be heading into a job that they are fearful, are they going to have that job next month?
Yeah.
They may be heading into any uncertainty around buying or whatever. On the consumer side, your refrigerator just broke. Well, that's never a good thing for anybody to have a major appliance break. There's any number of factors that we have to think about from a human perspective. And so when we think about the experience, we truly need to ask, what do we want our customers to feel at this stage of their journey? Whether they're engaging with our brand, they're buying something, they're calling our customer support, we're in implementation phase. What is that feeling, that emotion that we want them to feel? And then who on our side of the company is responsible for making that emotion real and delivering to that within our brand promise? So it's not an easy task, but I can provide really good service and still have a lousy experience.
Great. Thanks for taking us into that. And it's sorry you had such a bad experience at a restaurant.
Oh, no, we've been back many times since then. It's all
good. And I think that, by the way, that should that's a great lesson for entrepreneurs as we listen to that, because you've got a business that you love. It didn't go well. You had a bad experience there, but they fixed it with service. And the reason you keep going back is they probably took those learnings and improved the experience that they could consistently provide for you. And one of the things that I found early on in our business, both through our entrepreneurial journey, but more so through our customers' entrepreneurial journey, I found that feedback from customers is the gold. It's feedback you don't like to hear. You don't want to get that sometimes, especially if you're having a bad day. You're just like, crap, I don't want to hear any more of this. But sometimes that's the best thing that you need in order to improve long term. If you take that feedback and you build it into the systematic experience that you're delivering for your customers. It's one thing to take it and make it right for that customer. It's another thing to take the feedback and go and say, okay, where did the system break down? How are we not delivering the experience for our customer that we want to? Sometimes it's an employee training issue. Sometimes it's a technology issue. Sometimes it's a process or a policy that you've established that just sucks for the customer. It's like, well, why did we do that? And you can step back and go, yeah, that didn't make any sense. That might have made sense internally, but it doesn't make any sense for our customer. So getting that feedback is sometimes tough to hear, but in the case of your restaurant that you love, they fixed not only the incident, but they improved the long-term experience for you.
Well, and I think just listening to a customer sometimes and listening to their frustration, they may not even be asking you to fix it. They just need to voice their frustration and say, hey, this isn't what we expected. Once you get that feedback, I agree 100% is saying, yeah, build that in, use it as a learning. Don't be defensive. I think that's another, because so many entrepreneurs take their business as their own and bring their identity into it. Don't take it as a personal attack. But once you start to build that, first of all, thank the customer for sharing that, because it's not always easy for customers to share their frustration. But then close the loop. If you've used that feedback to improve the business, go back to the customer and say, hey, I want to thank you for that. Yes, it was hard to hear, but here's the improvements we've made in our business because you shared with us. So thank you for that. Is there anything else we can do? You've just changed. You might have taken a really bad experience, but because you've been attentive, you've now turned that experience into something positive.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you so much for sharing that. As part of what you're describing there, you talked about as people interact with your company or your brand, as you get bigger, you think of it more that way. When you're smaller, you're like, hey, they're interacting with our business. A lot of times it can feel impersonal if we're not careful. We're kind of doing what we do over and over. How do you keep that personal connection, that human connection as you're growing your business and serving more and more customers? Because that part can be really tough. Small businesses get into business because a lot of times because they can be different. They can stand out from the big competitors and they can deliver this great personal experience. But any advice for the entrepreneur that's wanting to maintain that great personal human connection with their clients, their customers, but they're starting to struggle with it as the business grows?
Yeah, I think just first of all, recognizing it is going to be harder, and some things have to change. And again, back to earlier in the conversation, it doesn't always have to be you that's doing that, especially when you're part of that growing business. It can't be you. There's not enough hours in the day for you to do it and do it well. And so what I think you have to do is replicate yourself through your team, where they are all, Steve Cook, CEO of Apple, once talked about something that's in the DNA of Apple employees. And I loved how he described that, because that just means it's part of them. And so if you can do that with your team and do it well, you now have said, okay, I can still provide the personal experience, but I'm doing it through everybody who's part of this organization. It shouldn't rest, as you grow, it should not rest solely on you, because you're going to your customers will start to notice it's not the same if you decide as the entrepreneur, I've got to control this. And so I think it's really valuable to do that. And then I think, again, just recognizing the humanity. One of the things I've learned is when a customer comes to you and calls, and I still got calls from some of our customers who would say, hey, can we talk? That active listening, and again, it's something that I should have had my wife on this podcast, because a lot of what I learned about human interaction is from her.
You and me both.
But just, I'm sorry?
You and me both with, my wife,
right?
yes.
but just asking the word, so tell me more.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. Okay, so you're frustrated with this employee. You weren't pleased with that service. Tell me more, because all you're saying at that point to that person is, I value you as a human. I value your feelings, and I want to affirm whether or not I agree with it is not relevant.
Yeah.
I'm just going to affirm that right now you're frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that affirmation brings that human element, and that's how we keep it personal,
Yes.
even if we scale to a hundreds of customers.
Yes, absolutely. That active listening is crucial. And I can't help but think as we're talking about this, one of the ways that you can do this is with technology. And,
yes.
What we do at Keap, if nothing else, is we help to automate the follow-up for people in a very personal way. So it doesn't feel mechanical or automated. It can be very personal. And why? Because it's what you just described. When you say you don't have to be the one to control that, you don't have to do it all. You can do that through employees. You can also do it through technology. You decide
100%.
the experience you want your customer to have. And whether that's a new lead that fills out a form on your website and you want to make sure that they have a consistent experience that they go through, or a new customer that bought from you or signed up for your services, and you have a welcome campaign and the way that you bring them into your business, all you have to do is decide what that needs to be, set it up once, and then each time a prospect goes through that lead process or a customer goes through that new customer welcome sequence, you can deliver that experience that you dreamt up in a consistent way, and you don't have to be the one doing it. So whether it's your employees or your technology, you as the entrepreneur need to decide, well, what is that experience I want, and then how do I get that into our people and into our processes, our technology, our systems, so that it can happen naturally.
And I think it's going to be all of the above.
Yeah.
Because you're absolutely right. Technology is a huge part of it. And I think the language we use in our communications that we push through our technology is huge. So being empathetic in our language, things like, hey, we know you're really busy, or we know you have a lot of choices. All we want to do is thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no call to action. There's no upsell. We're just here to thank you, and maybe give something to them. If you're in the consumer business, give them the opportunity to, use a coupon code or something, or just say, hey, you know what? We're going to give you $10 for free the next time you come in, just as a thank you for our business. Mm-hmm. So I think using that type of empathetic language, but to do that, you really have to know who your customers are and what keeps them awake at night and what problems they're trying to solve for.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. But before we kind of get off of this personal part and the how do you do that effectively, is it any different in B2B or B2C?
I think B2B can be a little bit more complex, only because you oftentimes have a group of buyers versus one or two individuals. In the consumer world. So I think the complexity is different, but at the end of the day, we're still selling to people.
Right.
I'm not selling to a brick and mortar building. I'm not selling to, an account, so to speak, and that's not to throw shade at ABM, mm-hmm. but I'm still selling to people who feel, who emote, who get frustrated, who are scared. It runs the gamut. We've got to understand that. And if I can be empathetic and understand you and talk to you in that way, whether it's person to person or over technology, the chances of me endearing my brand to you go up significantly.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. So what signs should people watch for when, I want to sort of raise the alarm bells for people, because as you're running your business, doing what you do every day, these things can catch you off guard. So these customer success fails or customer experience fails can happen. So what signs should people watch for? What should a business owner be looking for to notice if they've outgrown a process for consistently serving their customers and keeping them happy? Are there telltale signs that you've seen? Any words of caution that would come from the wisdom of years that you've put into this?
I think when you get to the end of the day and you think, oh shoot, I forgot to call that customer. Okay. That's a sign, right? Yeah. You're so busy growing your business and working on your business And so that's a sign. I think when your customers are calling you with the, hey, we haven't heard from you in a while. If your customers are the ones who have to be proactive to track you down, that's a sign that things are starting to slip, or it's a precursor to things are starting to slip.
Great.
When you're hearing from your customers and all it is about is complaints or issues of dissatisfaction, you've already crossed that chasm and now you're on that downward slope, and you've got to start to address some things pretty quickly. And maybe one of the first things should be listening to what they have to say.
Yeah, great feedback. Awesome. Okay, so I talk a lot about the stages of small business growth and how businesses sort of follow this natural evolution. And the customer experience challenges, I imagine, change a little bit as you go through the stages. So what have you seen for kind of in the earlier stages? So let's talk about the solopreneur for just a second. What are the common things that the person is experiencing as he or she's trying to run the business, and they're not, they're struggling with the customer experience? Do you see anything with the solopreneur specifically?
Yeah, I think solopreneurs most often don't define what their company stands for.
Okay.
They're, hey, I'm a contractor, or I'm this, or I'm that, or, okay, well, but really ask yourself the question, why do you do what you do?
Yes.
And it's not about your service or your solution or your product. Why do you do what you do?
Yeah.
And then why would the customer care?
Totally.
So if you can establish that, that's going to help you align with your customers, and it's actually going to make your job more meaningful, and you're going to have a heck of a lot more fun doing it.
Yes, totally. And it's so natural when you're a solopreneur. It's in your head. It's just naturally who you are. You don't really, you just kind of be that. It just happens every day. And that's fine if you don't have more employees, because they're not having to read your mind. But you said it. It's like it actually will help you to attract the right customers, the right clients, if you get clear on why you do what you do. I've spent a lot of time over the years talking to entrepreneurs who want to do a better job in their marketing. And it's like, well, who are you trying to attract? Why are you trying to attract them? And they'll talk about their product or their service. And it's like, well, okay, well, why get that product or service from you versus a product or service you can get from anywhere else? And they'll first say, oh, because mine's different and better and blah, blah, blah. And you get down to it, and it's like, well, maybe not so much differentiation there that you think that you're thinking. Why should they do business with you? And what happens is, as you get clear on why, who you are, what you stand for, why you do what you do, you start to realize the kinds of clients that you want. You start to attract those clients more effectively. And to your point, you can serve them so much better because it's natural. There's a natural fit that's been created because you established who you are, what you do, why you exist.
Yeah, and I also think it helps you just as a solopreneur not get whiplash by the demands of the customer.
Right.
And I see a lot of solopreneurs doing that. Well, I can't, the customer's asking me that. So for this one, I'm going to color outside the lines.
Right.
And I'm going to go that extra mile. And then for this one, I'm going to do the same. Well, now as a solopreneur, you have 15 customers and none of them are the same.
Right.
And now everything starts to break down because you're trying to custom everything. You're one person, only so many hours in the day, and the experience starts to falter. And then you start to lose those customers.
Right.
Because you don't know who you are.
Right. That's so well said. I tell entrepreneurs sometimes, I talk about the early stages of our business, and we would do anything anything tech for anyone.
Right. Oh my word, they have a pulse. Let's get them.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then gradually it was like, no, you know what? Let's just do software, custom software. And then it narrowed more, CRM software, and it narrowed more and more. And over time, we've actually narrowed more in order to grow. Now we have new product lines, but those products are about the narrow focus that we have in helping our customers get organized and follow up and automate so they can grow. And I think the counterintuitive thing for entrepreneurs and smaller businesses is we think we've got to take on more things in order to grow, sometimes it's as simple as to pay the bills, pay the mortgage, keep the lights on, but it's actually getting more specialized. And the specialization is an important part. And if you don't know who you are and why you exist and really what you do, it's difficult to specialize. You take on whatever comes in the door. And as you said, you described it I think it takes an entrepreneur to know one. And I have been there. I know what you're talking about. I think you've been there. I think a lot of our listeners realize, yeah, I got to do a better job of not just taking whatever work comes so I can keep the lights on.
Right.
At a minimum, you should know what you want to take so that you can either be intentional about saying yes to work that's outside the lines or intentional about saying, no, I'm not going to take that work because it's outside the lines. And let's be honest, sometimes you got to take something on that's outside the lines in order to stay afloat. And unfortunately, that's the reality that I've observed for small businesses is you might be really, really clear on exactly what you want. And unfortunately, that's not coming before the mortgage is due. So you have to do certain things sometimes in that very early stage. But I always caution people, don't fall into that trap where you stay there. Right. You've got to be clear about what you want and move to that point as quickly as possible, because every job, every client, every project you take on that's in your sweet spot is worth 10 times more than something that's outside of the sweet spot, and you're doing that because you have to keep the lights on.
Absolutely. Make it the exception, not the rule.
Yeah. Okay, so this has been awesome. We've spent some good time talking about it. We talked about some of the challenges that the solopreneurs face. By the way, if you check out the blog in the caption, and you can see there's some resources there for you, because I talk about these stages and some of the things that Carlos is describing about what you've got to do to progress through the stages of growth. And by the way, if you decide to settle into one of these stages, it doesn't mean that you don't focus more on the customer experience. In fact, if you'll really refine your process, you'll find that's where all the profit comes, because your profit comes from serving clients really, really well. They stay with you, they refer more, they repeat, they spend more with you. That's where the profit lies. But a lot of times we're moving so quick to the next stage that we don't get the customer experience right, and the profit suffers. So
that's right. Hopefully
those resources will be useful for you. And if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them, and then we'll catch them in the replay, or we'll fill in the comment, or we'll fill in the questions or the answers to your questions. But I think I just wanted to, as we wrap up here, Carlos, is there anything that you wanted to share in closing that maybe we haven't got to? I know you've got a lot of experience, you've got a lot of expertise in this area, and I didn't want to just go with my comments and the things I was thinking about. Anything that you would like to leave as you think about entrepreneurship and growing your business and not sacrificing those relationships in the process, but actually cultivating those relationships with great experiences to grow. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I think just an emphasis on the fact that everybody we interact with is a person. They have emotion, they have fears, they have frustrations. Simply taking the time to recognize that, and recognize that, okay, they may be on the other end of the phone very upset with me, but I know it's not about me. And maybe just saying, tell me more, or what's really going on? What's really the issue here? And there's an example, and I know anytime you talk about CX or great customer service, Zappos comes up. But there's a story about a Zappos employee who talked to a woman who wanted to return her husband's shoes after like 2 years or something like that. And it turns out her husband had passed away after a multi-decade, I think 50 years of marriage. She just wanted someone to talk to. She wanted to talk about her husband to somebody. She called the Zappos guy. And so really trying to go through and say, let's get to the humanity of what we do. And when we can do that in business, it doesn't mean your customer relationships are going to last forever, but it does mean you're going to have richer relationships that grow your business. And as an entrepreneur, you're going to be so much more fulfilled from that. And so I think just a parting word is, remember the humanity in business.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate the point about the fulfillment that comes from it, because that's what we enjoy. That's what we love doing. I love helping small businesses grow. And I love those relationships that come, whether it's our partners or our customers, as well as our keepers, which we refer, our employees, we call them keepers, who help small businesses grow. It's the humanity, it's the relationship. Yeah. And it's one of the reasons I love small business, because it is so personal. Sometimes as the business gets bigger, it's just not very personal. I love the way that we get to have that personal connection in small business. Carlos, I appreciate everything you shared. Your wisdom has been great. Thank you for spending some time talking. It's been fun to rekindle a 10-year-old relationship that we started a long time ago. I appreciate the opportunity to just chat a little bit. And I hope this has been useful and helpful to our audience and the different challenges that they face as they grow their business, to not let things slip through the cracks, not let that valuable relationship suffer when we're trying to grow our business. I know I've made mistakes in that in the past. I know entrepreneurs make that. Let's learn from them. Let's grow. Let's get better. And to everybody out there, keep going, keep serving, keep growing.